are new to portrait photography and you're totally confused by all the lens choices out there, maybe you've taken a few photos of your friends and family and you just haven't liked the result. You're probably wondering, well, what lens really is the best lens for portrait photography? Well, I've tested out two of my favorite lenses for portrait photography to find out which one really is the best. So you can see the results for yourself and decide which is the ultimate portrait lens for you. If you're anything like me when I was new to photography, you're probably super confused about all the different lenses, the numbers, all the different words, the zoom lens, prime lens. It is all so confusing. And it's so hard to know which lens is best for which subject. After getting a diploma in photography and being an Air Force photographer for over 12 years, I know which are my favorite lenses for different subjects. But today I'm going to put my favorites head to head so you can see the results from both. So my favorite lenses for portrait photography are a 50mm prime lens and a 85mm prime lens. Unfortunately, I did use the 85mm prime lens in the Air Force, but I do not have one of my own. So we are going to do the test with my 24-105 lens. And because it has a mark on the lens at 70, I'm going to test it out at the focal length of 70mm. I'm going to shoot both photos under the same conditions with the same settings with an aperture of f4 in the hopes that they will, be a good comparison and look kind of similar. What I'm looking for in a visually pleasing portrait is a nice blurry background and a nice sharp person, especially the eyes. That is the most important thing to be sharp, but I want the whole face to be sharp in this shot. So let's put the two lenses to the test. I'm going to use myself for the subject today because I don't have anyone else around that I could use and I don't really want to bug some random stranger. So I'm just going to set up in my home on a tripod and put it on an interval timer, which is pretty much like a self timer, but it will take 10 photos for me. So I've got the two photos here to compare. They are the most similar ones I found, which I actually thought they were reasonably similar. And the first thing I noticed was that my face actually looks a bit more realistic in the 50mm shot than the 70mm shot. This is the 70mm, this is the 50mm. And you do get a little bit more distortion when you're going to 70mm. My face starts to look a tiny bit wider, and in the 50mm shot, my face looks narrower and longer, which I think is more what it looks like in real life. But yeah, both reasonably nice shots, a nice blur in the background in both of them, but you'll just notice that in the 70mm shot the background looks larger, and in the 50mm shot the background looks smaller or further away, and that's just because 70mm is more zoomed in than the 50mm, or the focal length is longer, which draws in the background, and I quite like that. I quite like that look, especially for this shot, because it's cropping out a whole lot of that big ugly TV on the right hand side, and it's leaving us with mostly a nice colourful blurry bookshelf. I have noticed that this one is a bit softer than this one. The 50mm has a lot more detail when you compare it to the 70mm, and that really interested me. It's probably because just the different lenses, but this lens is like a $2,000 or $3,000 lens, and this is like a $200 or $300 lens. So I found it really interesting that the cheaper lens, like way cheaper lens, actually has better detail than the more expensive lens. But that really has nothing to do whether it's 50mm or 70mm. That's really more to do with the actual lens build. But in general, I am going to say, if you're comparing a 50mm lens with a 70mm lens, then the 50mm for me comes out on top, just because it keeps the face looking more realistic and doesn't distort it at all like the 70mm does. Of course, it is going to depend on what you have in the background too, and whether you want to have that look larger behind the subject, or you want it to look smaller and further away behind the subject. That is a big consideration, but in general, I think that the 50mm is a winner here, and I probably am going to continue to shoot most of my portraits on the 50mm. Both the 50mm and the 70mm focal length were great. I loved the results from both lenses, but it just goes to show that you don't have to spend a huge amount of money on a lens to take good photos, because I actually preferred the photo from the 50mm lens. It was a lot sharper in the details on my face, and it gave a nice blur in the background, and it was pretty much the perfect result for what I was looking for. If you had an 85mm prime lens, then you might get results just as sharp, and then it would be a tough competition. If you think you're using the right lens but you're still not getting the results you're after and that nice blurry background, then maybe it could be your settings. If you want to learn all about my favorite settings for portraits, then you can click this video up here and learn all about my favorite camera settings for shooting portraits. So go ahead and watch that video, and as always, I hope you are taking those baby steps to master your photography and live your best life.